So I told an AI to finish the rest of Tom Holland's second Spider-Man trilogy, from the release dates, the poster creation, castings, and designs. Now, it is worth noting the AI doesn't fully understand the events of Brand New Day, so what we end up with is something. Stick around and you'll see. Now, before I get into it, if you enjoy this video, feel free to drop a like or subscription. I am a new channel and it would mean the world to me. Now, onto the video. To get it started, I booted up the clanker known as ChatGPT and gave it a brief rundown of Brand New Day. I told him to finish off the rest of Tom's trilogy. First, we got the story settled. It takes place after Secret Wars, so likely a bit in the future. Then I asked it to integrate another character from the MCU to stay in line with previous Spider-Man movies, and surprisingly, I liked who they chose, that being Johnny Storm. And finally, I told them to cast the new characters and villain, that being Norman Osborn, played by Matthew Rhys, and Black Cat, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Now, call me crazy, but that's not a half bad cast. Emphasis on Black Cat for reasons. But that's about as good as it gets. Let me cook, you'll see. Now, the fifth movie in Tom's saga is known as Spider-Man Shattered Trust. A bit on the nose, but you know, I wasn't expecting much else. When asked what Norman looks like, this is what we got. It's basically just a worse version of the Goblin design we already had. Anyways, the story goes as follows. The film opens on a montage of New York being rebuilt post-Secret War. Pete doesn't have the symbiote like we all thought he would. Instead, he's basically gone back to living a life of seclusion and isolation. However, he has started making money through photography again, so that's something. One night, while responding to an armed robbery, Spidey sees Johnny Storm racing through the sky and decides to race him. I kid you not. They just end up ignoring the armed robbery. Anyways, after Pete is invited to a charity gala for the newly established Oscorp, he ends up face to face with Norman, but upon realizing who he's talking to, he immediately has a PTSD episode and begins a deep dive investigation into Oscorp. I'm not kidding about the episode. He just tweaks out in the middle of the gala. Apparently, he just went to a charity event without knowing who it was hosted by. Anyways, Johnny is also fairly involved in this investigation and tries to convince Pete Norman is clean after they can't find any dirt on him. Now, at some point, Peter meets Felicia Hardy, who pays him no mind at all. Instead, she's more interested in Spider-Man, which sounds about right. Felicia is secretly robbing Oscorp blind, and Spider-Man just kinda lets her get away with it. I'm starting to question if GPT even knows he's supposed to stop crime, not just play around. Peter confronts Norman about a secret division he discovers that is apparently researching genetic enhancements, which are normally explained as being defensive measures against otherworld-ending threats like Kang? Yeah, apparently Kang is the big bad of Secret Wars here. Doom falls off the map post-Doomsday, I guess. Anyways, Peter doesn't believe Norman. Johnny, however, does because, you know, drama. All while this is happening, Black Cat is literally engaging in acts of terrorism across New York at various Oscorp facilities, framing Peter, and he does nothing. No, literally, she doesn't appear again throughout the entire script. Not even a mention. Now, after pressure from his board, Norman tests Oscorp's experimental serum on himself, but this time, instead of going crazy, he becomes cured of all his ailments, because apparently he was sick, and now he's become enhanced in every way. But when Peter hears about this, he goes into demon mode. Johnny tries to plead in Norman's favor again, but dude, read the room. This is when Oscorp reveals they've also been working on a drone defense program, which basically immediately turns on citizens for literally no reason. Peter confronts Osborn, blames him for the death of his aunt, and they just start fighting with literally zero precedent. Bro, drones are murdering people as we speak. Maybe it's not the time to trade blows with a relatively clean Norman Osborn just because he's wearing an exosuit. Pete shuts down the program after beating Norman while Johnny was attempting to rescue citizens, and the movie basically ends there, with the end credit scene setting up Norman to return with magically generated pumpkin bombs, except this time he's actually evil. But I'ma keep it real, Norman really didn't do anything illegal. Spider-Man literally sent him down his path of villainy by beating on him just because my boy hopped on some TRT. He's not even the one who launched the drones, the board of directors did. But that basically marks the end of the fifth movie. Now at this point, I was so fed up with dealing with AI that I genuinely wanted to ram my head into a wall. I had to tell it to write a script 3 different times and reminded GPT of the characters it put in the film. Don't worry, filmmakers, this goofy clanker over here is not taking your job anytime soon. As we move into the sixth movie, I noticed GPT was taking a lot of inspiration from the Batman, with it even noting the Batman as one of the 2 main inspirations for his more detective-driven angle. And so, wouldn't you know, the sixth movie has Moon Knight and Spider-Man teaming up against Norman Osborn, and I promise you, you won't guess this one. Mr. Fear. The dynamic of Peter and Moon Knight is even described as being reminiscent of Batman and Robin. Oh boy, I wasn't expecting much, but I would have never guessed that this clanker was gonna make the latter half of Tom's trilogy an off-brand Batman and Robin arc. Alright, you ready? Brace yourselves now. The story goes as follows. Under the ruins of the now destroyed Oscorp building, we see Norman make his return as he prepares to take down Spider-Man. Then for some reason we skip 6 months into the future. Bro was just twiddling his thumbs for 6 months, I guess. Oh yeah, you know how Felicia Hardy was bombing buildings and performing acts of terrorism in the previous one? Apparently Pete doesn't care. They've just been sneaky links for 6 months. We cut to an attack on the subway where people are visibly terrified, but no one can seem to agree on what exactly was attacking the station. Moon Knight arrives first, launching an investigation, but when Spidey arrives, they just start throwing hands because Peter doesn't like his style. Just ignore the fact that he's best buds with Punisher, of whom GPT has also seemed to have forgotten about. Mark and Peter end up working together, tracing Mr. Fear's rampage all across New York, all the way to schools? Oh nah, he's one of those? We just gonna move past that. Anyways, plot twist, Mr. Fear is conducting experiments on the people of New York for Norman Osborn. Turns out he was an ex-Oscorp employee. At some point, Norman gets tired of Peter interfering with his pointless experiments, so he just shows up to Peter's apartment and has a one-on-one like he's Homelander or something. And then, I kid you not, for 10 minutes they talk philosophy. Not just 10 minutes in universe. The scene itself is 10 minutes. They don't even fight, they just talk. As if Norman wasn't ordering hits on schools. Now while this happens, Moon Knight has apparently been infected by Mr. Fear's fear chemicals and is going even more crazy than he already is. Now, you thought the schools were bad? Nah, because next, my guy Norman starts attacking children's hospitals. I'm not gonna hold you. It's kind of worrying how much kids are being targeted in this script. Anyways, these attacks spread across the city, forcing Black Cat to leave New York just before Mr. Fear and Norman Osborn nuke the city Arkham Knight style with fear chemicals. Moon Knight ends up taking out Mr. Fear in an abandoned subway because apparently he just likes to hang out in there. And once more, on the rubble of the destroyed Oscorp building, Peter and Goblin go at it again. You'd think someone would have gotten that mess cleaned up by now. Norman tries to force Peter to kill him to make Peter more like himself. Spidey refuses. Then we cut to the epilogue where Norman is now in jail, and that's it. Like, there's literally no more depth, no more story. He's just in prison now. The post-credit scene ends up being Pete watching over a young Miles Morales as he stops a grocery store robbery. And that marks the end of the 6th movie. If you made it this far, you are one of God's strongest soldiers, because these movies were a two-pack of ass. And if this all sounds a bit derivative, it's because AI cannot create. It can only imitate. And for that reason, I would like to know how you would have handled the rest of Tom's second trilogy. Because me personally, I wouldn't have approved of a single goddamn thing in this video. Aside from Anya Taylor-Joy as Black Cat. And of course, Matthew Rhys as Norman Osborn. I think those two castings are actually pretty solid. If you enjoyed this video and want to make my pain worth it, consider dropping a like or a subscription now. I'ma go ram my head into a wall.